States that provide an incentive for the first generic? Are there very strong clear language in the agreement to allow for the ability for generic and biosimilar companies to do the necessary testing that's required to get approval so that the generic is available on day one when the patents are expired? This is critically important to patients, and we have an amazing panel that I want to introduce now to talk about the effects that a treaty like this can have on patients. First, immediately to my left and your right is David Mitchell. David is the president and founder of Patients for Affordable Drugs. And he's a patient. He's a patient with an incurable but treatable blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And he depends on drugs for his survival. David is one of the strongest patient advocates for affordable medicine that I've ever met. You will hear him speak from a patient perspective about the potential impact of this treaty. To David's left is Marcy McClintock-Coates. Marcy is the head of global policy at Mylan. She oversees the global policy function, and prior to her current role, she served as vice president and chief of staff in the office of the CEO. She's also a lawyer, so you can pepper her with complicated regulatory questions, and maybe I'll help her do that. So. And then to Marcy's left is Lee Purvis. Lee is the director of health services research at AARP. She leads a team of policy analysts and researchers who work on healthcare issues that are relevant to the 50-plus population. In addition, she heads the Institute's work on prescription drug issues. So each of the folks here, I think, will make a short statement, and then we'll ask questions, and most importantly, we want to be here to answer your questions. So I believe Lee is going first.
Hi there, thank you for having me here today. So I have the unenviable task of trying to level set on some really complicated issues. So bear with me on this. For those of you who are not familiar with biological drugs, they are different. These are drugs that are derived from living organisms, as opposed to traditional drugs, which are derived from chemicals. Probably the most obvious difference between the products is their price. A lot of these drugs that have those eye-popping six-figure prices are biologic drugs. Another difference is that generic versions of biologics are known as follow-on biologics or biosimilars because they aren't exact replicas the way the traditional drug generics are. However, there's a lot of fear mongering about that. The reality is that brand-name biologic drugs are biosimilar to themselves, and FDA is doing a great job of regulating those products, but there's nothing here for biosimilars. There's also differences in terms of the exclusivity that they receive after FDA approves them. Traditional drugs get 5 years of market exclusivity, which is the minimum amount of time before generic drugs get approved. Biologic drugs get 4 years of data exclusivity, which is the minimum amount of time before FDA can accept an application for a biosimilar approval, plus 12 years of market exclusivity. The distinction is really important. If biologics had 12 years of data exclusivity, it would be an additional 1 or 2 years after an application is accepted before a product would actually reach the market, which would effectively give 13 or 14 years of exclusivity. So what does this have to do with NAFTA? As you've heard, we're hearing the new agreement to grant 10 years of data exclusivity. That's 6 years more than what they currently have under U.S. law, and it means it would take that much longer for less expensive biosimilar drugs to reach the market. It would also require other countries to increase their exclusivity periods. So basically, we're making our system worse, and also worsening the system of other countries as well. We're also hearing that there be additional tax protections, and a system that's already being used by drug companies. So what does that look like? This is an example that kind of highlights all the issues I'm talking about, which is Humira. It's the top-selling drug in the world, but also happens to be a biologic. It's used to treat rheumatoid arthritis. Humira made $12.4 billion in the United States in 2017, over $16 billion globally. It's expected to reach $20 billion in global sales. Currently retails for around $50,000 per patient. In early 2018, its price increased by 9.7%, and that alone added an estimated $1.2 billion to the U.S. healthcare system. AbbVie, its manufacturer, has filed 247 patent applications on Humira alone. It is also requested to receive multiple oral drug designations applications that also prevent competition. Between that and other efforts, AbbVie has managed to build up competition for an incredibly long time. The product was approved in 2002 and will not face biosimilar competition until 2023. The reason I'm telling you this is that it's extremely hard to argue that biologic drugs, or any drugs, need additional tools in their arsenal to build out competition to show their products at lower prices. So what is AARP's role? Our members, and based on this polling, pretty much everyone in this country is fed up with high prescription drug prices. It's very hard to imagine that they would support changes that would make the situation worse. We also worry about the programs that they rely on. Medicare covers a lot of expensive prescription drugs, including biologic drugs, and spending is increasing by double-digit percentages every year. Meanwhile, Medicare Part D holders are facing co-insurance or being asked to pay a percentage of the drug's cost, including as much as 50%. Medicare Part D does have a catastrophic cap, but some enrollees still face cost sharing as much as $10,000 per year. Medicare Part D beneficiaries are responsible for 20% of their prescription drug costs. There is no out-of-pocket cap. Some beneficiaries face cost sharing of as much as $100,000 per year. Meanwhile, Medicare beneficiaries rely on very modest fixed incomes and limited savings. The median income for Medicare beneficiaries is just over $26,000. 1 in 4 have incomes of less than $15,000. And more than 1 in 4 have less than $15,000 in savings. So what we're talking about is a population that has absolutely no way to be able to afford the products that we need to get healthy. Another thing that's very important to note is that Medicare is a taxpayer-funded program. Every single person in this room, excluding the taxes, is helping to pay for these products in the Medicare program. All of which has been very well worth saying that NAFTA provisions under consideration are extremely problematic. Prescription drug spending is unsustainable, and frankly, we literally cannot afford another big way to drug industry. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. My name is Marcy McClintock-Coates, and I'm with Mylan. Mylan was founded in West Virginia nearly 60 years ago, and we came from a US-only company, but 10 years ago we went global. And so today we are one of the world's largest generic manufacturers, but also have one of the world's largest portfolios invested in biosimilars. And our contribution in the US for generics, we are the second largest filler of prescriptions in America, comes from Mylan. We have over 650 products and an average selling price here in America of 25 cents a dose. Our medicines in the last 2 years alone have saved American taxpayers and patients $50 billion. So we are very interested and very aligned with the association here and the groups regarding intellectual property. Now, as much as I just touted our generic record that we have worked to build in all the countries around the world, I'm also proud to say that we're an innovative company. We have over 2,000 scientists. We've invested $3 billion in research and development in the last 4 years, and we have 4,000 patent assets. So we certainly care about the importance of innovation. But as we have learned, the US has the highest generic utilization rate in the world. We're at 90% utilization of prescriptions in America are generic. And the report just came out and said last year, generics across America saved patients and taxpayers over $250 billion. And the reason for that success, and the conversation we've had with many regulators and governments around the world who want to replicate the success of the generic industry, is because of the very careful balance that the US struck in Hatch-Waxman, of recognizing the importance of promoting and rewarding innovation, but also including the promotion needs for competition and access to medicine. And we have been a strong proponent, as well as AAM and many others, that in every policy proposal, be it trade or otherwise, that balance is absolutely critical. And we have learned over the decades of growing as a global player, what is the outcome that occurs whenever that balance is off kilter. And so I want to share a couple of pieces of those, and we'll get into those momentarily. But first I want to talk about biosimilars very briefly to complement the good outline that AARP just outlined for us. But very quickly, biosimilars represent 40% of the drug spending in America, biologics, excuse me, that lack biosimilar competition, that we are all very mindful of, and our submission to USTR is back there as well. that outlines some of those provisions. But specifically, if you look at the data protection piece, the United States today is at 4 years data protection as the time period by which you cannot even file an application. If that language, though it's not said data exclusivity, the press that says data protection, it's quite unclear. If that actually is going to move to 10 years, that would be a significant increase. But let's talk for a moment if it isn't data and it's going to take us from the current 12 in the United States to, let's say, 10. What does that mean? Well, a couple of things. First off, for Mexico, that means they're going from 0 to 10. For the United States, on its face, you may say, well, you're at 12 today, you're going to 10. Let's unpack that a little bit. As I just mentioned, we have exclusivity for biologics. We've had decades of it. We have 4 in this country. Do we really need more to be rewarded? It's the number of hurdles that are in place, hundreds of patent thickets that companies have to go through to file. Very few of us even have the resources to invest the $200 million on average every time we even tack on a biosimilar. We applaud the administration and the visibility that they have given to all of the various abuses and commercial constraints that are making it even more difficult to bring a biosimilar to market. 4 have launched, but more than 10 have been approved, and it just speaks to the number of protections that are already in place. So we agree with the FTC, who says we don't even need this type of exclusivity because there are so many other protections that are in place. And from that standpoint, we have seen this before. A few decades ago with TRIPS, it was brought up that we need to extend the protection in order to reduce prices here at home. And in that instance, patents who have many, many protections extended here in the United States from 17 years to 20 years. And when we extended by that time period, several things happened in that regard. One, we had much product at that point in time that we were unable to sell. We had to destroy, and it set the industry back a decade, and we are all continuing to live with those higher standards that are here. But as you can see in time, brand drug prices on average have increased 15% a year. That additional exclusivity has not resulted in the change in pricing scheme that one would think. And so we just urge, as we're looking at this, that we support all of the provisions outlined to increase competition in the President's blueprint. There are some really pinpointed issues in there that do need to be addressed, and Dr. Gottlieb and Secretary Azar and their teams have identified them, and we want to achieve those goals hand in hand with them so that we can bring more affordable access here in the United States. But we are quite concerned that the provisions in NAFTA 2.0 may have the effect of undoing those very goals of achieving competition. Not only is it vital for the ability to get access to patients sooner here in the United States, if other countries are enshrined in the language that makes it longer, in the case of Canada, that would jump to, just give me one example, from 8 years to 10, that means that companies that are part of AAM and needing generic and biosimilar, we rely heavily on our global revenues in order to give us the needed capital to take on this sometimes $100 million or more worth of lawsuits alone to bring these products to market. In the case of Mylan, I told you we began as a West Virginia company, and 10 years ago went global. And today we rely on revenues, more than half of which come from outside the United States, which are absolutely critical for us to be able to invest the $3 billion in R&D that we have. All of that money is going to bringing competition to complex products today in the United States. The top 20 most expensive drugs in America today have competition for 2 of them. It's $100 billion worth of spend. So we urge this balance that has been the very stalwart of America and savings and the access that we've been able to provide to make sure that the fine print details of NAFTA 2.0 do not have the result of lengthening the amount of time that brands are on the market without competition. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. David, from the patient perspective, can you explain the relevance of this treatment?
Yeah. So I am David Mitchell. And the fact of the matter is that prescription drugs are keeping me alive. And not saying don't believe me. In fact, right now, a key drug that I take is a biologic. It's called Undermine. I had it 1 minute. It takes about 5 hours when you keep on cocktail of drugs. It was $18,340 every time I gave it to me, and it is now $19,734 every time I give it. These proposals to extend exclusivity under NAFTA have hurt patients like me right here in the United States, not just in Mexico and Canada. But this is really, it boils down to an effort to grant longer monopolies, and it would create a floor that we in this country would potentially have to abide by. Some of you may remember back a couple of years when people in Congress and the former president fought for 7-year biologic exclusivity, lost, Obama won that round. But that doesn't mean that sometime in the future we couldn't roll back that 12-year exclusivity for biologics unless we individually treaty that precludes that from happening. And that is big pharma's real game here. So I'm just one patient who would be hurt by this effort to extend exclusivity into trade agreements. Sue Lee, one of our patients in Crestwood, Kentucky, she has plaque psoriasis. She's been on Humira for over 4 years. It was a miracle drug for her, but it became so expensive that she couldn't afford it anymore. She stopped taking it and tries to manage her plaque psoriasis, which is a very painful and uncomfortable condition, rather than empty her savings and give it to Eddie. Lance is from Louisiana, one of our patients, Hep C, can't afford a home, and wonders how long he can go on living without it, because it would cost thousands of dollars a year to take on and use that drug. The fact is that these efforts to extend exclusivity are really not at all about helping patients in this country or abroad. They're about big brand companies making more money. And it's just that simple. The claim that we need to provide these extended periods of exclusivity in order to spur innovation and save lives simply isn't borne out. What the companies do is game the system to extend monopolies for existing drugs instead of investing to develop new ones. Take AbbVie and Humira. Its main ingredient went off patent in 2014. There's no biosimilar yet in this country. There will be one in Europe. They made a deal. Instead, AbbVie filed 100 patents, created a patent estate or patent thicket around Humira in order to stop a biosimilar from coming to market in this country, and entered into 3 different pay-for-delay deals that will not have biosimilars until 2023. This is the best-selling drug in the world. These deals really, the ones that have been described, would take us in the opposite direction of competition in free markets to help lower prices for patients and consumers under the Hatch-Waxman framework. They take us in the opposite direction of innovation and new drugs, which I happen to need to stay alive. My disease is incurable because it mutates and it finds its way around drugs. I'm already in the second-line drugs, I've relapsed. And if they don't invent some new drugs, I'm going to die sooner than I want to. That's just a fact. So innovation in new drug development is critical to me, but this particular set of proposals that's being discussed at USTR and in these NAFTA negotiations are not going to help me. But back to price. An FTC report estimated the price impact of biosimilars. It projected that overall, as biosimilars enter the market, we can achieve a 10 to 30% price lower than the originator biologic. This was confirmed by a study by the Congressional Research Service that reported that European biosimilar drugs have reduced prices in some cases by 1/3 compared to the original price. And here's a really important point to make. The problem of pricing is only going to get worse because of extending the extended exclusivity periods for biologic. Why? Biologic represented 28% of the U.S. drug spending in 2013, reached 37% of U.S. drug spending in 2015. That means instead of patients like me having to wait to get a generic drug of 5 years for a small molecule drug or 7 for an orphan, we're all going to wait 12 at least. And by the way, remember, none of these companies lets a drug come to market for 12 years. That's why there are only 4 on the market right now. So we're really talking about 12, 15. So instead of, contending with 5 or 7, the norm is going to move into the teens before we see biosimilar / generic competition. So it's a big deal. It gets really loose. And then we need incentives for biosimilars to be developed. I'm not going to repeat what was said about the fact that the biosimilar developers need to feel like if they undertake the expense and time, not only for the scientific research, but for the legal challenges, that they can actually get somewhere in a reasonable period of time. And then finally, international freeloading is an argument that's been put forward by the originating brand companies to shift the blame on someone else to justify their skyrocketing prices and pursue these kinds of government actions that further increase their revenues and profits. But let's be real clear on this. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that if you lower the prices of drugs in other countries, make patients pay more, that we're going to, if we increase the price of drugs in other countries, make patients pay more in those countries, that we will reduce prices at home. And the reference was made to TRIPS in the 1990s. The whole idea there was that prices would come down in this country. They haven't, they've only gone up. And as a patient, I find it truly offensive that we in the United States of America would suggest that a child with cystic fibrosis in Britain should pay more for her drug because she has a government that negotiates on her behalf for lower prices when we don't. And that's why we don't have lower prices in this country. Every other developed country in the world negotiates directly with the drug companies. We don't. We pay 2 to 3 times what they pay. So we can have innovation to lower prices. I believe that truly. We can have it and still stimulate the profit motive under Hatch-Waxman. And to buttress that point, I just want to close with a quote from Secretary Azar. Secretary Azar said, "For too long, there's been a lot of talk on drug prices and no action. Drug companies have insisted we can have new cures or affordable prices, but not both. I've been a drug company executive," he said. "I know the tired talking points. The idea that if 1 penny disappears from pharma profit margins, American innovation will grind to a halt. I'm not interested in hearing those talking points anymore, and neither is the president." Amen.
Thank you so much, David, for that talk and for sharing the patient perspective. We do want to open it up for questions. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and ask one, and if there are others, please feel free to raise your hand. And this is for Marcy. From a company perspective, for a company that is actually trying to develop biosimilars for patients in this country, what are the factors that go into the decision of whether to make an investment in a new biosimilar for U.S. patients? And is one of those factors the potential global market for the biosimilar?
Absolutely. They're so costly to develop, it has to be from a global lens, really. We already have experience in 30 others before even coming here to the United States, just given all the hurdles that are in play here. But bringing a biosimilar to market in terms of what's number one, well, in terms of investment, it's return. And when are you going to get that return? And so when you look at the number of products that are out there and the cost that it takes to bring these on, to develop them, as well as to take on the legal challenges with the voluminous patent estate, as David mentioned, and many of the other barriers that are here, when you've invested a couple $100 million, and you do not get a return on that until you were planning on that, and then that moves out because of abrupt changes like what we are looking at here potentially, that has a big impact. And that's just on biosimilars. This also impacts small molecule drugs, and that is extraordinarily concerning. As I mentioned, the top 20 drugs in this country, only 2 of which have competition. Some of those are biologics, many of those are complex small molecules. Mylan has said before, our generic Advair that we have pending with the FDA, we've spent $800 million to bring that product to market. We don't have it here yet. How long can you float these types of investments and not get return? And whenever rules of the road are changed to extend even more exclusivities on the other side that moves that out, as publicly traded companies, how long can you keep investing without getting a return? And we need to be able to get those returns just so that we can keep fueling and taking on the challenge for these other most expensive drugs in the country that are driving up responsible for almost half of the cost. They are real, and they do matter. And as we are waiting on that return, we here in the United States, which has been more delayed than other countries, absolutely, every bit of revenue that we are making in the other countries go in and fueling that pipeline. We need that. So if our business in Canada were to witness a shift to go from 8 years to 10 years, that has a real impact immediately on the medicines that are there, along with all the other generic companies, biosimilars in Canada. And the same thing, Mexico is a growth market for us as well. So that's very concerning if we can.
Thank you. Do you want to open it up for questions from the audience? Okay, please.
I have 2 questions. One is a clarification of the there's some confusion. If the treatment, the NAFTA agreement has 10 years, it's not the legal protection of the market, that does not reduce the number in the US, correct? That is a floor, you still have 12, there's no reduction. So I just want to just clarify if that's the case from the panelists. And then the second question is about, you mentioned that a concern around the scope of what is taxable in what was put out about the agreement. I'm curious to hear more about what the concerns are there.
Well, I'll take the first. I think Marcy raised the second. You're absolutely right. The one bullet point that's been publicly released talking about 10 years of data protection. I think it'll be important when the text is released to take a look and say the data protection that a company can't put in an application or is it market exclusivity. But no matter if it's 10 years, that is thought of as a floor and not a ceiling. And so it will not bring down by itself the amount of exclusivity here in the United States from 12 to 10. So there would not be this benefit. If anything, it locks us in to 10 years when many people believe that 10 years is too long due to the patent system allowing companies to get a return on their investment many times over. Marcy, do you want to?
Yeah, and I would just expand on that to say, so if that's locked into a trade agreement, it also enshrines Congress into being subordinate to that time frame. So if after further review, 8 years after the passage of the pathway that got us biosimilars, and we decide we're not satisfied with only 4 on the market and we want to revisit to see if whether or not that exclusivity in the first place made sense, if 10 years or any time period is enshrined in that trade agreement, then we are bound by that if Congress later decides to revisit some of what are the challenges that are keeping products on the market. So I think that's an important point. In terms of the scope, so we don't know obviously without the text, but I just raised that where the definitions and the words matter. Because we support patents, obviously, for real innovation, but believe that the scope of a patent should be awarded for things that are truly novel and an invention. So if it is an evergreening strategy that someone is pursuing to get a patent for a minor tweak to something they've already invented, should that be covered? So these are the types of things in terms of what's considered to be a patentable subject matter that do indeed matter. And these are the types of things that a little bit of language that it's in may seem to be without consequence, but actually can have tremendous consequences of what the bar is in the first place to get a patent. and thus we have to challenge it, and that keeps products off the market. And I would also say, this is far bigger than Mexico and Canada and the United States. Any trade agreement deal that's reached with text now becomes the standard for the world of which they will operate on. And so we will have to fight this everywhere.
Other questions? Okay, well, I will take the moderator's prerogative again. So Lee, AARP releases its annual report on trends in prescription drug prices for seniors. What trends has AARP found when it comes to biologics and the impact on what seniors are paying?
Well, reports focus on retail prices of the products. We've been consistently tracking the prices of when there was vitamins that were Americans. And I think the easiest way to explain what we see in terms of price trends is that they're just going up and they're going up even faster. We've also noticed that in some instances, for some biologic products, when it seems that they could potentially be facing biosimilar competition in the relatively future, they will bump up their price increases even faster. So they're definitely responding towards the market, but I think it's very safe to say that the products are remarkably expensive and they're becoming more so every year.
I want to ask David a question. As mentioned, rising prescription drug prices are a top concern for the public here in the U.S. And a Kaiser Family Foundation poll recently found that 80% of respondents say that prescription drug prices are unreasonable, and that passing legislation to bring down the price of prescription drugs is a top priority, higher even than addressing the opioid epidemic or passing an infrastructure bill. Is the Trump administration and Congress doing enough to lower prescription drug prices, and what could they be doing more?
No, none of us are. Not anybody in this body, not us, the patients for affordable drugs, not the administration. Nobody's doing enough. Why do I say that? Because drug prices keep going up. We have not arrested the growth in drug prices in any meaningful way. There have been useful steps that the administration has taken. The Senate tried to do something that I don't think will lower drug prices. They tried to get direct-to-consumer ads to include pricing. It made it out of the Senate on a bipartisan basis, and yesterday it got taken out. And as near as we can tell with our investigations, it's because Pharma called his friends on the House side and said we want it out of the bill. It is that simple. We have a lot of work to do. Now, there are good signs. I do believe that Commissioner Gottlieb is doing great within the scope of his authority to speed more generics and biosimilars to market, to clear the backlog. He was railed against all of the tools that are used to deny biosimilars access to formularies and access to the market. So Scott Gottlieb to us is a real bright spot. The secretary of his team at HHS are trying to do some things. But remember, we have wild, extravagant promises. Prices are going to come down, watch, in the State of the Union. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be hearing about, we were told months ago, massive voluntary price cuts on the part of the drug companies. Zip. We were supposed to see a rule on getting rid of rebates, or certainly amending the way rebates are used under Part B. Nothing. You know, there are folks all over the city that are trying to do things, and that's good, but we're not doing enough. There is also hope at the state level. There are efforts at the state level that have produced results. There's a price transparency and notification bill in California, SB 17, that has potential to do good. There's a bill that became law in Nevada that only affects insulin, price notification and transparency. That also has the potential to do good. We're seeing, you know, states all over the country pass prohibitions on gas prices. Ohio went after the PBMs because of the way they were doing spread pricing, costing people more than taxpayers in particular, more for drugs in Ohio. So while I say no, none of us are doing enough, there are many people who are trying to do what they can. We just have to do a lot more to achieve a meaningful reduction in the price of prescription drugs that people will experience either in their out-of-pocket or in their premiums. And until we see that, we won't say we've done
that. Andrew Adair, American Academy of Family Physicians. This is sort of for everybody. We have the Trump blueprint, why do we think, if this 10-year provision is indeed, industry friendly, let's say, or brand drug friendly, how does that fit with it doesn't seem to fit with the theme of the Trump drug plan. And so how did that happen? Number one, I guess, does anybody kind of have a sense of how that works? And then secondly, the only thing I can think of is does this fall into the bucket of, and I agree with, I can't remember who said it, I agree that, raising prices internationally is not going to cause price drops in the U.S. I mean, companies don't do that. But is that sort of the bucket that people think this falls into? Is the idea that, well, if we force prices up overseas, is that kind of what they're using to hang their hat on, or anyway?
I'll just try what may be more of an answer from the heart than from the head on that. Let others do the head answer. It seems to me that portions of the work in the administration have been captured by Big Pharma. And they're driving. They're clearly driving this train on changing our trade laws to increase exclusivity in Mexico and Canada. So I do not believe that they're in charge of everything, but they certainly have managed to capture certain parts of the process. And I believe the Secretary is constrained politically with what he is able to do, notwithstanding the President's wild pronouncements. To that.
Talking here for AARP, the second question update with biosimilars. Did you say 50%? Then the period received 50%? Is that under Part D? Medicare Part D as a dog, so we have drugs from the pharmacy. The maximum cost sharing that we can charge in terms of co-insurance is 50%, and we are seeing that in Part D plans. Okay, and that's even with the VA, that's okay. So we go around here. Part D is a complicated benefit, but it's where it's in the initial coverage period where you see that type of cost sharing, and then we get into the gap, and then we get the catastrophic. You will see differences, but in that initial coverage period, that's when you see that 50%. Okay, that's what you see. There's not the cap of 5%. But you're thinking of it within the gap. The initial coverage period is different.
I can bring that to life for you.
Yeah.
There's a drug that's used for eye disease made by a company called Subgene. It's called Revlimid. Revlimid right now has a list price for 28 capsules. It's given on a 28-day cycle of $18,000, give or take a couple of months. If you're taking Revlimid on Part D, you get it in and out of the donut hole in January. And then you pay 5% of every 28 days, so 5% of $18,000 until December 31st. You can get very easily north of 10 grand that way. And these are for people, this is the cost for people whose median income is about $26,000.
Okay, that makes sense, because I know that a lot of the biologics are under my second question is, I know that a lot of the complicated bundling that's done to prevent biosimilar uptake is a lot of proof and but beyond the Remicade and biosimilar, what the biologic practices keep doctors from prescribing a lot of the fine. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I think you've echoed it correctly. Those are part of the challenges on the commercial side in terms of coming to market. When patients have been on these products for a long period of time, beyond that, there's a lot of just misinformation out there, this notion, similar, not the same, when these absolutely have the same clinical outcome. Biosimilars do as biologics. And when you have a starting point that is already in a place where the biosimilar is disadvantaged to come to market for bundling practices and other particularly rebate constraints and getting beyond the formulary that is involved, you couple that with these types of exclusivities and the broadening of the patent terms and many of the others that we've articulated here, that's where that's even more concerning. And I do just want to react because David raised the product of Revlimid and I perked up because this is just another example. This is a separate briefing topic, but you mentioned in part of it's covered by REMS. Many of the biologics are covered by restricted distribution program REMS. Revlimid is one of those small molecule medicines. And that's one, this is public, Michael's in a lawsuit over this. We've been trying for a decade to buy the brand product so that we can conduct generic trials against it, so we can submit an application to the FDA. And then once we submit the FDA, we have to review it. So that is another example of extra billions in the system of hurdles before we can even come to market that we're dealing with here in the United States that are real. I know that's a separate briefing topic, but I did want to raise that as a
Is there a bill that would address that?
the creates bill, that's right.
Any other questions? Well, the time is almost up. I just wanted to close first by thanking the panelists and just as important is a call to action. This negotiation is ongoing right now, and we know many of your staffs and many of your members are interacting with USPR. So you can ask some questions like, will increasing drug prices overseas help patients in the US or will it hurt them? And you can say, is this agreement truly balanced between innovation and access to medicine, which is what the Trade Promotion Authority requires. So far, what's been publicly announced, which is only about increasing the monopolies for the branded drug companies, does not seem balanced with the violent TPA. We think these are important questions to ask, and if there is going to be additional exclusivity, there should also be provisions like an incentive for first generic or biosimilar to create balance in this agreement. And we should ask you to ask a tough question in USPR. So thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.